Okay, so this video is great. This is I don't know if it's advanced or just fun or what it is. Let me describe what I have here. In a previous video, I created a little experimentation system using vibe coding, but kind of in a professional sense. It's something that I'm actually using. And I thought, I am having problems kind of reading these files that it's generating and kind of looking through all the results. So how about if I create a quick viewer? I can vibe code that up nice and quick. Well, that led down this crazy road that you're about to see. I fully asked Cursor to build a plan to convert the entire system, and it was not a small system, from Python over to Node.js. I've done this by hand in my own life, and it is faulty as heck. It is definitely not an easy thing to do. So it built up an entire plan, you'll see this in a second, and executed one at a time. We were checking things off the list as it executed each one of those steps. It's fantastic. And seeing the strength of these AI tools, this is just Cursor. There's no extra tools here. So I hope you get something out of this. This was really eye-opening for me. And believe me, I think you guys know, my eyes on this stuff are wide open. And this one was really illuminating. I hope you enjoy it. Let's take a look. All right, so let me introduce you very quickly to what we did in the last video, which was built this system called the Experimenter. I actually had a real need to be able to compare kind of prompts and injection into the prompts with an evaluation statement. So essentially taking some information, sending it to an LLM, getting something back, and then being able to send it to another LLM with an evaluation prompt saying, how well did this perform? That's simply put. So I decided to build an experimentation system. Maybe you saw that one. Go take a look at that video. I think that one's kind of interesting as well. But this one is kind of enhancing on that. This is the finished version of that product that I am then going to move forward here in just a minute. Okay, let's take a quick look at what it's like to run this. Let's just run an example of this. So I'm going to run our sample project through, and you'll see that it runs with the sample file. It is initializing the LLM. It receives the initial response from the LLM. It runs the evaluation. It receives the response from that evaluation step, and then it writes it into this file. And so what we'll do is come take a look at sample up here, and the results file is here. It will be the last directory, and this is the document that it created. And I'll quickly pull this open, and you can see just simple, it's giving me, this is kind of the experimentation definition. What was the evaluation results? 75% match to the question that's being asked. How long it took, a bunch of information. They get pretty intense in some of these scenarios. This is a very simple sample example of what's going on, but that's kind of how the system worked. And I thought, wow, that's kind of difficult. As you can see, if I look into the more difficult one to examine, this one has quite a few different files. And as I'm moving through these different files, okay, this is meaningful, this is good, let me go look at the next file. I can either keep looking through it with this very odd thing, get a Markdown Viewer to look at this folder. It just was hard, and I thought, why not? Let's make a UI for it, right? We can vibe code a quick UI to look at a folder and show you the Markdown information. That led into what you are about to see. And it's, to my estimation, it's glorious. So hang on for the ride. I think this one to me is definitely a favorite. All right, here I am in the converter, and what I want to do is create a new application in this empty JS folder, and I'm going to create kind of a Next.js application there. So it'll be a standard Next.js application that basically all of this Python stuff is the backend. It's basically the node services that the front end will call. A lot to ask of a system, but I think the best way to start with this first is to get a readout of kind of what this original program is and how we might move forward with it. So what I'll do is I'll come over to our system and go to a thinking model and say, I am interested in a architectural and kind of specification document of the application that lives in the Pyth folder, PYTH folder. I need you to kind of look through there and give me a full breakdown of what this application is, like a really discrete explanation of how this application works and what's useful about it, because we're going to go through the steps of converting this into a different language, and we need the very clear definition of the project, a specification, if you will, first. See what it comes back with. All right, here's what it came back with after thinking for quite a while. Python-based system conducting structured experiments, large language models, framework for defining, running, and evaluating AI model responses in consistent, reproducible manner. Application supports multiple LLM providers, dynamic prompt generation. There's a main controller, LLM integration, template engine, configuration management, utilities, experiment workflow, configuration system, templating system, key features, use cases, experiment structure, configuration file, template directory, data directory, result directory. I know, lots, but it's worth seeing. It really got through a lot of this. This does feel like the basic spec of this application without getting into the nitty-gritty of the how, because that how might really throw off the next step when we want to take this and move it into JavaScript. So, all right, it's a good start. I have asked for a spec. We have this spec here. I've put it in spec MD, so I'll clear this chat. I'm still on the thinking model here just as a note. And I think what I'm going to ask for next is I need to build a new Next.js application in this JS folder. And so I will first just tell a non-thinking model to do just that. I need to install Shadsia Next.js with maybe the command above in the /js folder in this project. Once you get that installed, let's run it and make sure that it executes. Okay, it finished, it ran it. Here it is running. So we have everything in place from the JavaScript application standpoint. I'll start a new one here. And now it's time to kind of ask it to take a look at the old Python system and create a plan. This one's much more about creating a plan than anything else. What I need you to do is do no coding. I need to get a very detailed plan from you, and I need you to take a look at the /pyth folder to get your understanding of the Python application that we have in place. What's worth understanding is that Python application has one interface, one starting point, which is main. What you do when you execute it is you pass it the name of an experiment, and in the experiments folder, you'll see subfolders. That's the name you're passing in. So really all we're actually doing is passing in a name that identifies a folder of files and a config. That config is the thing that drives everything. When we convert this, we need to convert this Python project into things and move them into the JS project we have, which is a Next.js application. When we do that, we want to make sure that right now, the only interface that we necessarily have is calling in with, a config name, essentially, a project name. But everything that the Python project is doing, we need to be done in this new JS world. So these are all backend processes that are going to be running in this Next.js process. Everything that you see in Python should be done in the backend of the Next.js application. The UI shouldn't be touched. We don't even need to call it at this point. We just need to create a plan to set up the services and the utilities and everything else that we'll need inside of the Next.js project. So please create a detailed plan of the steps you would take to do that. We will then be using that plan later to do the work. Okay, all right. It looks like it finished. And I'm going to just flash through this to show you the kind of document that it came up with. Looks pretty good. So it kind of creates this directory structure for the JS project. That is one of the things that it makes sense that it looked into the JS folder, figured out the structure there, and is saying, these are the kind of folders that we're going to need. This looks like the layout, the core functionality implementation, the logging system. There was a unique logging system, LLM integrations, how to do the different LLMs, templating engine, document management. So it needs to be able to read the documents and the YAMLs and stuff like this, the main application logic in these three different systems. So it's got all of this stuff, and at the end it has this implementation strategy. So what I've done is I've created a document, just moved this over, and note at the bottom, this implementation strategy is the thing that I've just copied down here, and I've put a 0 on it to have this check mark here as an indicator of what it should do, because the thing I'm going to tell it to do is work the next step in this plan, in the implementation of this plan, and I might call this plan, and then come back in when you're finished and put a check mark in and let me know. And so that will be our hook for it to say, oh, I got to go read all of this, get to the next item in the list that needs to be done. Let me go build all of that, put a check mark in, and it allows me to work through this piece at a time. Let me step into the first. Let's take a look at what that looks like. All right, as you might have heard, I very often go back to the auto select model here. The thinking model will do a lot of thinking and usually touch things it's not supposed to because it's so creative and really trying to come up with best patterns every time it touches things. However, in this case, I'm asking it to really go through and look at a plan and figure out what that means from code that's existing somewhere. And I'm going to let the thinking agent go figure out what I mean so that I don't have to be super specific about it. Let's use the thinking model here, but I wouldn't advise it for everything, as it will cause actually a little bit more pain in your project than you think. Okay, cursor, I have shared with you a conversion test MD file. This file is a description of all of the work that needs to be done to move a Python system and convert it into a JavaScript system using a Next.js application. I think all of the details are inside of that migration plan. If you need more information, there's a spec.md as well, just in case you want to understand how the application is supposed to work. But what we're interested in is the plan at the end of this conversion tasks document. There's a plan from 0 to 7 steps, and I need you to figure out what step you're supposed to take next in that plan, and the check marks will describe whether or not you have completed that step. So that'll be the indicator of what step is next. Go complete that, plan that, and complete that step. Work until you've completed it, and then come back to this file and update that one line item that you've completed with a check mark, and then stop. Do not continue on to the next step. We just want to work one step at a time, please. All right, see you in a sec. Okay, it's been looking pretty good. It's moving forward. I just keep telling it, go on to the next step, go on to the next step. It's what we're looking for. It is keeping it very focused. It's worth hearing from kind of an engineering standpoint. This is definitely a preferred way to work on something that has a certain amount of structure to it, that you want control over each element being done. There's a lot of promise in it. We'll see. Well, okay, at the last step, it wasn't quite the last step. I was going on to 5, building the API endpoints, and it just kept going. So it said 5. Oh, I did that. Let me move to the next one. Let me do the next one. Let me do. So it lost my previous example information saying just move on one step because I was creating new chats. I wasn't sending that back as context, but here we are. I think this is completed. I'm going to resume the conversation. As you can see, these tools stop. The thinking tool specifically stops after 25 tool calls just to keep the runaways from going bananas like we've seen at other times. So I'll resume the conversation and see what else it has to do in this space. I think it's done, but let's take a look and see if what it did has any value. All right, let's give it one run. It's created the CLI interface. Go ahead and run one test, please. So got a little bit of work left. Okay, it's worth mentioning we're at the place that it has converted enough. It's created the CLI. I know I'm building a web system. It also built a CLI to the application so that we could still use it with command line, which is great. That was just in part of our documentation that was telling it what to do. So it is using that CLI, which I think is wonderful, as the test interface for the server side. Right now, what you're seeing it go through is try to replace the tokens appropriately. The latest run, which is going on, sending initial, here comes back basic test, still not replacing the tokens correctly. So it's running in circles to try to figure out what is wrong with the token engine or the templating engine that it's using, that it's not replacing it correctly. So I'll let it kind of churn away on this and figure out what's wrong with the templating system. But really, it's already working quite well. You can see that it's calling the LLM, it's initializing it, sending the prompt, receiving the information, and maybe nothing's coming back since we're not getting anything here, but I think it's really the template engine that they're having problems with. Let's hang in there. It's just about done, I bet. Okay, so it's going a little bit around and around trying to get this templating system right. So what I advised it to do, I just stopped it in the middle of its work and said, hey, how about if you write a test case or a set of tests that you can run to try to learn how to replace correctly in your templating system, and then maybe we can use that to solve the templating problem. So it's in the middle of installing Jest and a couple other test systems that it'll use to run these tests to figure out how to build its templating system. That's kind of where we are now, and that's yet another example of use your engineering knowledge to help it get past places it might be stuck. Writing a test is a very easy and very, very reasonable thing to do. It'll also be there for the future as the changes come in. All right, and after, you can see here, after just a ton of runs, it went on and on and on through its test case. The test case was, in this case, and in many cases, really the best possible way to go, because it could just very quickly iterate over the error, make a change, run again, make a change, run again. Highly worth trying in some of your problems. If you see it going through the same thing multiple times, you might say, wait, let's slow down. Let's write a test case around this one little thing that you're trying to do. And you'll see it kind of generate through that. Since that's a command line kind of automatable system, it'll be able to go through that much more quickly than rebuild your system, reload your page, send me a screenshot, tell me what you want. Sometimes that's a much slower path. Yes, we got it. All right. So here we are. It is running the tests just like it was doing it in the Python world. So from CLI, we can have it run and evaluate the different code that's coming in using the files just like we were before out of the data system, using the templates inside of the system. So we've got the evaluation template and we've got the prompt request template, and as well as an output template. All of those seem to be working in concert. So now we have a system that's been converted magically over into Node.js essentially that we can utilize from a front end. And it's kind of crazy how straightforward it was to get this converted, even though I had to work with the AI a little bit to make sure things were checked in correctly and updated correctly. Using test cases and allowing it to iterate on the solution really solved the problem. And this is another great example of some of the way these tools can really enhance your abilities. I wrote this. Did I? Somebody wrote this. I helped write this. I co-wrote this in Python and wanted it in JavaScript. Well, I absolutely could have gone through that effort of doing that. I have a history of doing those kinds of things in my life, and they can certainly be painful. And this one was far less than that. It was much easier than that. So the next step here is, can I enable this from the front end in some simplistic way? Let's go see if we can create a very simple button that will make this happen. And that kind of means that we can make the call from the front end to the back end to run these evaluations. Let's go ahead and gut the current page that we have. So all the UI on the current page, and just have a single button in there. That single button at this moment should start the sample experiment. So whatever code we need to call on our API, whatever endpoint we need to call to kick off the experiment of sample, I'd like to do that, please. Okay, let's see if this runs. We have the terminal back here. This is the results folder that it should show up in. Looks like it's running. That's pretty crazy. Does this actually know when the experiment is over as well? Wow, they tied a lot of parts together. I didn't really ask for any of that. That's brilliant. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a little bit of advanced stuff. I need you to keep things very separated. Make sure you use hooks, that you separate business logic, all these kinds of things, but we're not gonna do too much. What I need you to do is, on this main page, I want to be able to render a list of the projects we have. Now, the projects we have will be the experiments that are listed inside of the experiments folder. And that experiments folder is the one that's in the root directory. So right now we have Jack Carousel and Sample as the two projects. So what I would like is for you to just, on the front page, show a representation of the current project so that we can select them. When we select one, I then want to go into a project page that is a 2-panel design. Again, remember to separate these things. So each panel should be a sub-element or sub-component. And on the left side of that, kind of the menu list, I want to see all of the folders inside of the result that is in the project that we just entered. So if we clicked on sample on the first page, we should go to the results folder essentially and be able to see the different folders. And it really is just going to be a tree list of all of the folders. And as you expand each one of those items, you can see each one of the files. And what we will do is allow you to be able to click things on the left side, the file name specifically, and it will populate on the right side. But initially, what we really need is that tree list of all of the files on the left side. Remember, as we're running an experiment, it may be adding new files to this list frequently. So you might need some mechanism to be able to feed back and hear that there are new files, and we need to keep that list, the left list, the menu list, updated while an experiment is executing. And that brings us to the last point that we want. We want a navigation bar at the top, or really an action bar across the top, that has a run experiment or run project. And that will kick off what we just did on the front page button, which is it just uses the experiment name or the project name that we just entered as the hook to call the backend service to kick off that project. That's a lot. Good luck. I think I'll give that to the thinking model. All right, here we go. This is a really big swing. Okay, I'm being told that it's finished that first enormous swing. I do expect quite a bit of breakage. I'm going to start the server for the first time. It does run. If we reload, what happens back here? Failed to parse from API config. Okay. I mean, that's not breakage. That's fine. Okay, it fixed it. I'm scared to go forward because right now it's full success. I just want to walk away and say, great job, we finished. Okay, let's walk into sample. Oh my God. I don't know how it does this. Okay, so this is fantastic. This is kind of amazing. I am shocked. Let's let's take a look at one of the files, right? Should we run? Let's take a look at one of the files. Okay, that seems perfect. I'm not asking it for Markdown Viewer yet. I don't want to bring in that complexity, but it seems like it's going to be able to do that very, very easily. I can at least look through our two files, and we do have issues. It's worth saying there's some issues here. So let's at least grab that so that we're not crossing errors. Let's get them solved one at a time. Okay, it now has to unwrap params for what it's worth, and that's all it needed to do. So now it's unwrapping the params, and we can move around in here. That's fine. And really a big major test here. Can I run this experiment? It did create a folder. See what this guy back here says. Yep, we can run the experiment. That is, I mean, I fully expected this would eventually work. I definitely did not expect that we would be able to do that. Excellent. So in our experiment viewer, there's some place that we're seeing the results of the experiment. I would love that to display in Markdown. So using some version of a Markdown viewer, and I think there's an MDX editor or something like that, because I think we will also potentially be writing in Markdown, but some kind of Markdown viewer needs to be installed so that we can see that. Let's get him set off on that. I think we still have an error over here running the experiment. Not a shock. All right, so let's see where we are. So these are the sample files. We can go back now. Let's go back into the sample files. So that's great. Let's take a look at one of these. It's now displaying as Markdown, which is excellent. At least it seems to be displaying as Markdown. I think this is supposed to be an H1 essentially. Seems like headings don't render for some reason. Let it work on that while we're sitting here. And I think we still have a problem with it not knowing when the experiment ends. So we'll deal with that in a second. This is kind of miraculous. There's our headings. Excellent. Golly, this is crazy. Excellent. So let's go into the more complicated version of Jack Carousel and say, let's look at the types only. And this is the display for types only. We got the 70% that we saw. I'm not sure that we have very good support for individual code blocks or fenced code blocks. So either code tags or code blocks seem to maybe at least not be styled very well. Let it work on that while we look through everything, because this looks fine, but it would be nice if it kind of separated a little bit more. And up here, I think some of these items are code elements. There we go. That looks a lot better. Yes, now you can tell what is code and what is not. This is insane. All right. If you're not amazed by this, I don't know what to do. This stuff is fantastic. If you wonder if you can build something like incredibly useful well with something like talking to a code editor, this is the example. Now, all I have left, it's like, I thought it was going to be the most complicated part, but all we have left is a way to be able to edit the config for this project. It's the last step. I will save that for a moment. I think we're at a great stopping point here. So this was an astonishing step. Oh my goodness. So I'm beside myself on this one, frankly. This is so good. Sometimes the vibes are just right. You know what I mean? It's flipping awesome. Okay. I got nothing else to say. Okay. I just couldn't leave good enough alone. You might have learned this about me by now. This was too much fun to play with. I woke up super early, hours before the sun did, just to come down and make this fix, because I really thought we needed the editor in here. And it's been a lot of fun to build. It hasn't taken much. There's a little bit of back and forth because of the original construction of the project. But as you recall, of course, we have being able to see each one of the outputs. But if we come back to the front page, it's a little changed. We now can get to each one of those objects, but we can also edit these experiments themselves. So I've put the editor together here. Allows you to change the models and the temperature and all this stuff. It allows you to update and add new documents to the experiment and remove documents from the experiment. It also allows you to see the different templates. If you recall, there's like the request template that is what goes out in the first request when someone puts in a prompt, and then we send that out for evaluation. And this includes both of those things. Won't kill you with all the details again. I'm sure you remember, like this was the response from the first request. And then in the end, how does it come out? How does it print out? What's the result? And this is what we were just looking at on the other screen. The output of each one of those things comes out like this. So it's neat to have an editor in here that we can just make these changes specifically. And then the next run of the experiment, we'll just use the newer files. And then at the end, we have different experiments. So these are the 2 experiments that are running when you run the sample. You can tell it which files you want to include in each one of the runs. And then that gives you, all of these different outputs that you can have depending upon how many experiments you have defined in there. So I just wanted to show you, it was a very quick add in here. I just could not leave it alone. And now it feels like basically a full system in very, very little time that I'll be able to kind of manage new experiments as I go forward. Anyway, I thought I'd share this with you and just throw it at you. Okay, so this was a brilliant experience. You can probably tell by my reaction. This has been great. The idea of building a full-blown plan for migration, allowing that plan to get checked off like you saw. Those kinds of things are the processes that I will definitely start using more going forward, is a very clear roadmap and plan. But it's also really worth saying you can see the strength of what Cursor's doing on its own, what it's capable of doing, when to use a thinking model and when not to use a thinking model, in fact. This was fantastic. I hope you got something out of it, because I thought I was in love with these tools before, but now I know. All right. Thanks for coming along on the ride for this one, and I'll see you in the next one.